I've lived in this neighborhood for 3 years. It's quiet, uneventful. The kind of place where nothing ever happens, until it does. It started a few weeks ago. At first, I thought I was imagining things. A light flickering on in the house across the street, the one that had been empty for over a year. My old neighbor, Mr. Holloway, moved away suddenly. No for sale sign, no new occupants. Just silence. The house sat there, lifeless until now. I noticed it while working late. My desk sits by the window, giving me a perfect view of the house. One night, at exactly 3:35 a.m., a faint glow came from an upstairs window. I stared at it, waiting for movement. Nothing. Then, just as quickly as it appeared, the light flickered off. Probably just the power acting up, I told myself. But it happened again the next night, and the next. Curiosity got the best of me. I started paying attention. I set an alarm. Every night at 3:35 a.m., I'd watch, waiting for the glow. And every night, without fail, it returned. No movement, no sound. Just that faint, eerie light in the empty house. Then, last night, I saw something different. A shadow. A figure moving past the window. Brief, almost imperceptible, but real. My stomach twisted into knots. Someone was in there. I grabbed my phone, my hands clammy with sweat. I dialed 911. The operator asked what my emergency was, and I felt ridiculous saying it out loud. Someone's in the empty house across the street. The dispatcher sent a unit. I watched from my window as the patrol car pulled up, 2 officers stepping out. They knocked on the door, waited, then circled the house. One of them tried the doorknob. It didn't budge. Eventually, they shined their flashlights through the windows, exchanged a few words, and left. A few minutes later, I got a call back. "Sir, the house is empty. No signs of forced entry. Probably just a faulty light. Let us know if you see anything else." I hung up, my throat dry. I knew what I saw. At exactly 3:35 a.m., the light flickered on again. And this time, the shadow turned its head and looked right at me. I couldn't sleep after that. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw it. That shadowy figure in the window, its head turning toward me. No features, no details, just a black silhouette watching me from across the street. Morning came like a slap to the face. I dragged myself out of bed, bleary-eyed, and sat at my desk, pretending to work. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, but my thoughts were elsewhere. Had the cops really checked the house, or had they just given it a quick once-over and left? The idea that someone, or something, was inside made my skin crawl. By noon, I convinced myself I had to do something. Maybe I was being paranoid, but I needed proof. If I could just capture it on camera, maybe I could make sense of it. So I set up a tripod by the window, aimed it at the house, and hit record. I left it running all day. When night fell, my heart pounded every time I glanced outside. The house sat in darkness, silent and still. But I knew better. 3:30 a.m. I sat in front of my screen, the video feed rolling live. I held my breath. 3:35 a.m. The light turned on. I leaned closer. The screen showed the same eerie glow seeping from the upstairs window. And then, movement. The shadow drifted into view. My body went rigid. This time I could make out something new. Arms long, unnatural, too thin. It didn't move like a person. It floated, slow and deliberate. A chill ran down my spine as the figure tilted its head like it was listening to something I couldn't hear. Then it stepped away from the window. I waited, gripping my desk, pulse hammering. The minutes dragged. The light stayed on, but the shadow didn't return. Then my phone buzzed. I nearly jumped out of my skin. My hand shook as I picked it up. Unknown number. I hesitated. Then, slowly, I pressed the answer. Static. No voice, just a low, crackling hum. My breath hitched. I almost hung up until I heard it. A whisper. At first, I couldn't make out the words, but as I pressed the phone closer, my stomach turned to ice. Why are you watching me? I dropped the phone. It clattered to the floor, the call still connected. My chest tightened. I glanced back at the video feed, my breath coming in short, sharp gasps. The window was empty. The light had turned off. Then, something moved in my peripheral vision. I whipped my head toward my own window. And there, standing on my lawn, staring directly up at me, was the shadow. I barely slept after that. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that shadowy figure watching me from the window. The logical part of me tried to reason it away. Maybe it was a trick of the light. Maybe I was exhausted. But the deeper part of me, the one that felt the raw fear in my gut, knew better. The next night, I sat at my desk again, phone in hand, waiting. 3:30 a.m. My fingers drummed anxiously against the wooden surface. 3:34 a.m. My pulse hammered in my ears. Then 3:35. The light flickered on. I held my breath. My gaze locked onto the upstairs window. For a long time, nothing happened. No movement. Just the eerie glow washing over the empty room. Then the shadow appeared. Not just a glimpse this time. It lingered. Right in the center of the window. Featureless. Unmoving. My breath hitched as I realized something chilling. It was standing exactly where I had seen it the night before, like it had never left. A cold sweat trickled down my spine. I reached for my phone, my fingers shaking, ready to call the police again. But as I hovered over the dial pad, a thought rooted me in place. What if they come, check again, and find nothing? What if it only appears for me? I swallowed hard, my throat dry. I needed to do something, needed proof. I grabbed my old camera from the shelf. It had night vision mode, perfect for catching whatever this was. I set it up on a tripod by the window, angling it directly at the house. Then, with my heart slamming against my ribs, I hit record. The shadow remained still, watching. I forced myself to do the same. Minutes passed. My breathing slowed. My eyes burned from staring so hard. Then, without warning, the light switched off. Darkness swallowed the house once more. I exhaled shakily and stopped the recording. I wouldn't dare review the footage yet, not while I was still sitting here, vulnerable. I needed sleep. Or at least, a few hours of pretending to rest before I gathered the courage to see what I had captured. I turned off my desk lamp and climbed into bed, but the moment I pulled the covers over myself, a new fear took hold. What if, when I check the footage tomorrow, I see something I wasn't supposed to? The next morning, I woke up feeling like I had barely slept at all. The anxiety from the night before lingered, a weight in my chest that refused to fade. I hesitated before reaching for the camera. Part of me didn't want to see what it had captured, but I had to know. With trembling fingers, I hit play on the recording. The video was grainy in the low light, but the house was perfectly visible. I watched as 3:35 a.m. came, and the light in the window flickered on. My stomach tightened. The shadow appeared exactly where I had seen it. Still, silent, just standing there. Then something changed. The shadow began to move. It didn't walk or shift naturally. It twitched, as if glitching, skipping from one place to another in barely perceptible jerks. My breath caught in my throat. Then suddenly, it turned. It faced my house. I paused the footage, my heart slamming against my ribs. I rewound, played it again. The figure didn't just turn. It took a step forward. Another. And then, The light went out. I stopped the video, my skin crawling. The shadow had moved toward me, toward my window, and I had no idea if it had stopped. I stumbled away from my desk, my mind racing. This wasn't just paranoia anymore. This was real, and I needed answers. I grabbed my jacket and stepped outside. The morning was crisp, the world too normal for what I had just seen. The house next door stood silent, empty-looking. I forced myself forward, crossing my yard and stepping up onto the porch. The door was locked, of course, but the windows. I moved to the side of the house, pressing my palms against the cool glass. Peering in, I saw only dust-covered furniture. No signs of life, no signs of anything at all. But something felt wrong. The air was heavy, thick with something unseen, and then I noticed it. On the inside of the window, barely visible against the grime, a message was scrawled in long, shaky letters. "I see you." I stumbled back, my breath coming in short gasps. The house was supposed to be empty. No one was supposed to be inside. Then who had written that message? A sharp sound cut through the silence. A creak. I turned my head slowly, dread pooling in my gut. The front door of the house was open. I stood frozen on the sidewalk, staring at the open door. It had been locked just seconds ago. I knew that for a fact. I hadn't heard footsteps, no sound of anyone moving inside. But now, the door gaped open, as if it had been waiting for me to step inside. I took a step back, every instinct screaming at me to turn and run. But then I saw it. Something moving just beyond the doorway. A sliver of darkness shifting against the dim interior. A shadow, deep and featureless, slipping just out of sight. My breath came fast and shallow. I had to leave. I had to go home and pretend none of this was happening. But before I could force my feet to move, something stronger took hold of me. A need. An obsession. I had to know what was inside that house. I stepped forward. The wooden porch creaked beneath my weight. The inside of the house smelled stale, like dust and something else. Something damp. Something rotten. The air was colder here, as if the sun never touched this place. My fingers trembled as I reached for my phone, flicking on the flashlight. The beam cut through the darkness, illuminating an empty living room. Old furniture draped in white sheets. A clock on the wall, its hands frozen at 3:35. The same time the light turned on every night. My throat tightened. I took another step inside. The floor groaned under me. The silence pressed against my ears. And then, from upstairs, I heard it. A footstep. It wasn't the house settling. It wasn't the wind. It was deliberate. Slow. A shift of weight against old wood. I backed up, nearly stumbling over the threshold. But then I saw something on the wall to my right. More writing, scratched into the peeling wallpaper. "You called them." My pulse roared in my ears. I didn't understand. Called who? I hadn't called anyone. The cops. The night before, I had called the cops. And then, I had watched from my window as that shadow in the upstairs room had turned and looked directly at me. I swallowed hard, my mind reeling. Was this a message? A warning? A threat? Another footstep creaked above me, and then another. Whatever was up there, it was moving toward the stairs. I turned and bolted. The cold air hit my face as I stumbled outside, barely catching myself before I fell down the porch steps. My heart hammered so hard I thought it might burst from my chest. The door to the house remained open, gaping like a mouth waiting to swallow me whole. But I didn't look back. I sprinted to my house, fumbling with my keys, throwing myself inside, and slamming the door shut behind me. My breath came in ragged gasps as I locked every bolt, every chain, every possible barrier between me and whatever was in that house. I backed away from the door, shaking, This was too much. I needed help. Someone needed to know what was happening. I grabbed my phone with unsteady fingers and started dialing. But before I could hit call, my bedroom light flickered. The bulb buzzed, dimmed, then flared back to life. My stomach dropped. I turned slowly toward the window. The light in the upstairs room of the neighbor's house had turned on, and this time, the shadow wasn't just standing there. It was waving. I don't remember making the decision to step inside. One moment I was frozen on the porch, staring at the slightly open door, and the next, I was pushing it inward, my breath shallow and uneven. The hinges groaned as if protesting my presence, and the scent of dust and decay filled my nostrils. The house was silent. I stepped over the threshold, the floorboards creaking under my weight. The air inside was thick, heavy in a way that made it feel like I was wading through something unseen. I swallowed hard and forced myself forward. My own house was right next door, but it felt like I had entered an entirely different world. My first instinct was to call out, but something deep inside warned me against it. Instead, I moved cautiously through the dimly lit hallway. The furniture was still there, covered in sheets, the air undisturbed except for my intrusion. The living room was just as I remembered it from when the neighbors still lived here. Only now it felt abandoned, untouched for far too long. I turned toward the staircase. It loomed in the dark, leading up to the room where I had seen the light. My pulse pounded in my ears as I placed a foot on the first step. The wood groaned beneath me. Step by step, I ascended, each movement deliberate, each breath shallow. The feeling of being watched intensified with every second. At the top, the hallway stretched before me, leading to a half-open door. The room. My stomach tightened, but I forced myself forward, my fingers brushing against the wall for balance. I reached the door, hesitated, then nudged it open. The bedroom was exactly as I had seen through my camera, empty, except for the dust-covered furniture and the window that should not have been illuminated. My gaze darted to the floor, to the walls. Then I saw it. More writing. It was scrawled all over the walls in the same jagged, uneven hand as the message on the window. Some of the phrases were smeared, others overlapping, but I could make out distinct sentences. I see you. I see you. I see you. Over and over those 3 words repeated, until my eyes landed on the final, fresh message scratched deep into the wood of the bedroom door. Now you see me. The air shifted. A noise, barely a whisper, sounded from behind me. I spun around. The hallway was empty, but I wasn't alone. I don't remember running back to my house, but suddenly I was there, locking the door, shutting the blinds, and turning off every light. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely grip my phone. I had to call someone. The cops wouldn't believe me, but I had to do something. Then my phone vibrated. A notification. My security camera. Someone was at my front door. I hesitated before checking the feed, dread curling in my stomach. The camera's night vision flickered on, and my breath caught in my throat. It was me. I was standing on my porch, staring directly into the camera, motionless. The face was mine, but it wasn't right. The expression was empty, the eyes too dark, too still. And the worst part? My mouth was moving, but no sound was coming out. Then, the camera feed glitched. When it came back, the figure was closer. Another glitch. Closer still. I dropped the phone. A sharp knock echoed through the house. Then another, and another. The knocks weren't frantic, weren't violent, just steady, rhythmic. I backed away, pressing myself against the far wall, heart hammering in my chest. The knocking stopped. Silence stretched for what felt like an eternity. Then, the doorknob turned. I bolted. My mind screamed at me to do something, run, hide, escape. But where? How? I fumbled for something, anything, to defend myself, but my body wasn't listening. My vision blurred with panic as I heard the door creak open. Footsteps. Slow. Deliberate. I squeezed my eyes shut, gripping the nearest object. A lamp. My breath hitched as the footsteps drew closer. My heart pounded so loudly I thought it would give me away. Then, they stopped. Silence. Again. I forced myself to open my eyes. The living room was empty. The front door stood ajar, the cold night air seeping in. I wasn't alone. I knew it. I could feel it. But I never heard the footsteps leave. I don't sleep anymore. I don't turn the lights off. I don't look at the house next door. But every night, at exactly 3:35 a.m., I hear it. The knock on my door. For more bone-chilling stories, hit subscribe and keep the lights on tonight.